Hey, Victor Lane with you right here. We're in Artist Alley, and we are with the lovely Renee Witterstat. Now, before we tell you what she's up to now, and you probably, unless you guys are like Marvel or DC comic people or Topps comic people, you probably never heard of her before. But you know, everybody watching this is, or you better be. So, she was editor for all three companies at one time. You are a publicist and a publisher and so many more things. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So first off, just tell me how you got started in the comic book industry.
Oh, okay. Well, how I got started was really, it has to go back to my childhood when I was probably maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. I have 2 older brothers, and they were the comic book collectors. So they would always have Spider-Man comics in their room, and I distinctly remember like going into the room and borrowing their comics. And I think, yeah, I mean, some of the first ones I remember were ones you wouldn't really think of, like the Jerry Lewis comics that DC put out. I thought those were hilarious. And then also, I distinctly remember that one of my brothers had the Spider-Man issue where he met Mary Jane. Unfortunately, I think at that point even it was torn to shreds. I wish we still had it, but I remember very, very well going and reading those books. And that's kind of how it started. It's germinating in my brain. I was always a very shy kid. I was one of those kids that would always watch old movies, always read books. I would try to read a book in the library and keep lists of every book that I read. So I was very much always in the fantasy realm, like trying to use my imagination. And that translated to later on me being part of the journalism groups in schools and writing articles and working on the yearbook staff. And I found that interviewing people was something that I had a knack for, something that I enjoyed, finding out what each person's story was. And so I got my degree in college in journalism and English. And it just so happens by a twist of fate that my first job out of college was working for a company in Dallas called Bulldog Productions that put on the Dallas Fantasy Fairs and conventions throughout Texas. And that was also a twist of fate because one of my friends in Texas, the Flemings, forced me to go to my first convention in Dallas, which was 3 hours from where I grew up. So it was kind of a road trip that, you know, I had not really gone to Dallas that many times at that point, even though I was in college already. And that started, that opened one door, and then one door led to the other. And through my job as the artist liaison and publicist for the Dallas Fantasy Fair, I got my first job at DC Comics as an assistant editor. So really, one door does lead to another. You just have to be able to be willing to walk through that door.
Right.
Yeah.
That's and aside from doing the editing and such like that, you also are an international lady, and well, I mean, we could go on that for hours and hours about some of the things you've done, and you know, as far as that goes.
It's all being freelance.
You're extremely good friends with Jackie Chan, and you've been in his movies, and you've done a lot of things with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
And so you met him through like a kind of a odd reasoning and stuff as well, didn't you?
Yeah, Jackie's a great guy. I mean, he's one of the best, most altruistic people I've known. You should check out his charity if you don't know about it. You can find out about it on his website. But the way I met Jackie was I was an editor at Marvel Comics, and they were looking for different types of books at that time. They were more open to doing books that weren't really the norm. And I worked very closely with Mark Grunwald, who was one of my mentors and really someone who was the heart and soul of Marvel for so long. And he always encouraged us to think outside the box, you know, to think about ideas that were groundbreaking, things that would be interesting and new instead of just the regular stuff. And my friend Marie J. took me to see a movie in Chinatown in New York one night, and it was Armor of God, a Jackie Chan movie, and I had never seen the Jackie Chan movie before. And I loved it. I thought he was so great on screen. He had such great personality and such great energy, great athleticism. And to me, he was like a comic book character come to life. So that very night I got the idea. It's like, you know, they're always talking about trying to break into the Chinese market, the Asian market. Why not do a comic on Jackie Chan?
Absolutely.
So I went to Mark Greenwald the next day. He loved the idea, and he said, Renee, see if you can make it happen.
Go find it.
Yeah, and I did. I remembered that I had an old friend that I hadn't talked to in years who was a writer for Inside Kung Fu magazine, Rick Myers. He's actually a martial arts expert. He does the panels on martial arts at the San Diego Comic-Con every year. Really fantastic, knowledgeable guy. And he introduced me to Jackie. And within a week of seeing my first Jackie Chan movie, I was on a plane to Hong Kong. And we created a comic book series. Michael Golden and I actually created the comic book series together, based on all the research I did in Hong Kong and watching and studying Jackie at work and studying the Hong Kong cinema in general. And the name of that comic is Spartan X. Now, as a weird twist of fate also, years later when I got into the movie industry, I ended up working on a lot of Jackie's movies.
And you were actually in.
Yes. Oh, that was so funny when I would go to Hong Kong. You know, when I would go to Hong Kong, what Jackie does is anyone who's on the set, who's his friend, he like grabs you and throws you into scenes. It's like, okay, you go do this, and you go do this. And I think one of my most prominent roles in any of Jackie's movies is in a movie called Crime Story. And there's a plane scene, if you watch that movie, where Jackie and one of the other main characters are talking on the plane, and I'm kind of sitting right in the middle of them wearing a black and white houndstooth dress. And it was so funny, I remember distinctly, because Jackie would direct me in how to drink a cup of coffee. He's going, okay, I want you to do this, and then at this point I want you to do this. And yeah, but he's an amazing, talented man, and I just adore him.
And to have all that attention to detail also.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Now you're only in the movie as a bit part or as a background character, but
right.
We want you to have this character and doing all these things.
Well, you know, if you like Jackie's American movies, you should really see his Hong Kong movies because they are his babies. He's in charge of them from beginning to end. The fight choreography, no one's telling him what to do. Jackie has an innate sense of what makes a good movie and what makes it exciting. One thing I love about Hong Kong movies is that they don't crop the fight scenes too close, and they don't cut the scene. When Jackie does fights in his Hong Kong movies, the ones from the past, they film the entire fight from beginning to end, and without cutting, without cropping too close. You can really see what's going on. People should check out movies like Super Cop, Drunken Master 2, Drunken Master. He's just an amazing, talented guy, and the reason he's so good at choreography is because he was brought up and raised in the Peking Opera School. And these days, I don't think people really know this because Jackie never toots his own horn, but a lot of American movies, a large percentage of what he makes on those movies goes straight to his charities, helping flood victims and earthquake victims and people in need, because he always felt when he was growing up that the Red Cross really helped him and really kind of helped him survive, basically, with care packages, and because his family was very poor. And so he really always tries to give back to people. And you know, I know I'm like running on here, but I really can't say enough good things about Jackie and his work.